and for Babe and Coach Yankowski and Oscar Kadarian and Bill Boyce and Vic Palladino and Richie Green and father and son Cousino and a few others, and then they would have closed the doors. I've always felt that our Hall of Fame represented a quilt with many different pieces forming the weave. Each one of us is in our own way forming a part. Some are brighter than others, but all help bring it together and make it better. So it is that each of us have been influenced by what has come before us, and hopefully each of us had some influence on those who followed. As I began to think about this evening, I couldn't help but reflect on how many who have been elected to this Hall of Fame had a direct effect on my life. Oscar Kadarian and Bill Boyce taught us the game of baseball when I was 10 and 11 years old. Great players who took the time to work in the Watertown Recreation League at Victory Field. George Yankowski coached me in junior high and coached me in high school. Tommy Oates was one of my park instructors and always took the time in those hot summer months to work extra with me. Don Costello and Frank Cousino, Bob Dupree, and Vic Palladino were my football coaches. Ando Dedegian was my next-door neighbor. Whitey McDermott and Lefty Lavrakis lived around the corner, and my father always confirmed to me how good they were. And my father always told me that no one hit it farther than Jocko Ananian. Freddie Milmore was a close friend of my family. I was a water boy when Nick Donito played, and then had a chance to play against Nick Donito when he, late starting college, played at Boston University. Arthur Shannon was my freshman hockey coach, the only year I played hockey at Watertown High School. I played with Ricky Grant, and Dave O'Brien, and Bob Capadonna, who in addition to being an All-American, was the best teammate anyone could have. I played with Al Veracki, whose Grand Slam home run against the eventual state champion Brockton is a play I can see as clearly tonight as if it happened yesterday. And I played with Richie Green, who is still the best athlete I ever played with. Bobby Clark was my Legion coach, and I coached Dick Umili at UNH, I coached Gary Brackett at Holy Cross, and I coached against Dominic Lally at BU. So it is within that idea of being part of a whole that I find my place. Coaches and teachers have had a great influence on me from the very first time I met sixth grade teacher who just passed away this past week, Bob Harrington. And he helped build confidence in me. Don Fournier, who dedicated many, many years to Little League, made me a catcher. Maybe because I couldn't play anywhere else, but it became a position that I grew to love. Someone who's often forgotten, but not by us. Carl Clem let me catch for the 9th grade team when I was in the 7th grade. And he'd give us new baseballs to play with when we were having vacations. Brian Crowley coached me in CYO basketball and baseball, where I caught a young kid named York. And Jeremiah, who would become an All-American at BC, became a lifelong friend. Coach Ward, my freshman football coach, who coached when he coached us in 1957, had been coaching since the 1920s and was a connection for me to the past. Coach Solito, whose enthusiasm filled us with love for the game. Coach Dupree, who helped keep us on the field. Coach Costello, who always encouraged. Coach Cousino, who was the best line coach I ever had. Coach Palladino, who was always more than a coach to all of us. And Coach Yankowski, who developed in me a love for baseball and reminded me so much of a great coach I later worked with, Charlie Holt. Hob McGuire and Lefty Burgess, never one without the other, who I played for 5 years. Mal Whitney, who did so much for all of us in Little League, Babe Ruth, and Legion. And Tom Roach, who simply was the best teacher I ever had and inspired me as a student. And John Kelly, who represented respect and has been a constant reminder to me of what a good principal should be. My mother and father always let me play, and the East Playground was my home. You could play there, you could establish friendships there, you could learn to play cards there. You guys know you could gamble there. You could walk your girlfriends there, you could skate there, and from there we went to George's for a soda, and some went to Armenian school, and some went to the Hood Rubber for test, in the hopes that we could get a new pair of sneakers. We played ball there all the time, and we turned over ice cream trucks, and we cut down oak trees. And we played judge. And if you hit it to the right of the tree, you were out. And we argued, and we argued, and we argued. It was a special place for a young boy to watch how older boys played. I watched Tom Oates there. I watched Ted Kelly there. And I watched Dick McBride practice punting there. And I knew Harry the Duck, and I knew Yankee Joe. It was a special place for me. I was one who looked up to the athletes. Many of the players on the 52 and 53 teams were players I knew so well. I knew Aaron Miller was number 14, and later I knew that Leon Karagulian was number 55. I know Joe Basile was number 30. I know Donnie Quinn was number 10. I knew that Ted Kelly and Bob Leonard and Frankie Aracali and Donnie Higgins, I knew they all played center. As a grandson of Irish immigrants, my models were a rainbow of nationalities. Often I would look out my front window on Boylston Street and see this strong figure walk down the street from his house at the top of the hill. I tried to emulate his distinctive walk. I watched him when he played. I followed him when he played at Boston University. Harold Klumjan was a unique part of my life and my growing up. And when it came time to take a number, I asked for Harold's number and wore number 56 in every football game I played. But to me, it was always Harold's number. It was just borrowed from him. Tonight, as I reflect, I think of my teammates. I think of my dear friend Harvey, whose picture was there on that collage. I think of my teammates who are not here, Georgie Bedrosian, Tony Perella, and our dear friend Eddie Valenti, who passed on this past year. And I think, as I always do of Paul, Sully's death was so tragic and so unnecessary. In a major way, my mother and father nurtured and molded me. In another way, this community gave me a deep appreciation of the value of differences in people. Whatever spirit of tolerance and understanding is in me, it was definitely supplied by my experiences in Watertown. Those experiences are one for which I am eternally grateful. Thank you. Enough of that.
Tell us about your first play from scrimmage.
That's Richie. Richie likes to tell a story. First play from scrimmage, we were supposed to sophomore, and we were supposed to come out and yell. And we would break the huddle, and we'd come out and we'd yell, and we'd break the huddle, and yeah! That was the center supposed to do it. So I broke the huddle and went, yeah! Took 2 steps and fell down. I just scared the wits out of them. He loves to tell that story, Richie, you know. I'd like to introduce some people who are here before we go too much further. First of all, a lot of folks, political folks here from Watertown, and we want to get to all those folks, but I would like to introduce 2 great college hockey coaches who donated stuff here tonight, Jerry York and Jack Parker. Jack Parker at BU and Jerry York at BC. Now we have Northeastern represented here, one of the great athletes that ever played at Northeastern, and a wonderful coach, John Tinker Conley. John, where are you? The 1918 football team. When the Hall of Fame was formed in 1991, the first team chosen for induction was the undefeated 1977 football squad, thought to be the only undefeated and untied team in the school's history. But detective work by Nick Avgus showed that there was another team that was spectacular. The 1918 football team, points for 258, points against none. By the spring of 1918, former Holy Cross All-Star Jack McDonald took the reins of Watertown High School sports and led the baseball nine to the Mystic Valley title. The very first football game served notice that the Raiders were a powerhouse as they beat Newton, posting a 7-0 shutout behind tight defense and a 65-yard interception return by Robert Conray. and it only got better from there. Excuse me. Watertown beat Norwood 35-0. Wakefield 49-0. Framingham 51-0. Melrose fell even harder, 76-0. Arlington 29-0. And the Raiders beat Brookline on Thanksgiving Day 13-0. Their last two scheduled games were not played, postponed because of weather. They were canceled as a Spanish flu epidemic swept through Massachusetts. But they won the Mystic Valley Championship. They had run up a spectacular record, of which the Boston Herald said few schools could boast. 5 members of the team were named all-scholastic rosters. Hall of Fame halfback Ed Cousino, center Waters, fullback Stevens, tackle Ferris, and back Shanahan. Start with the names: McDonald, Wallace, the Shanahan brothers, Dedarian, Conroy, Chamberlain, Shea, Cousino, Malley, Stephen, Kanaka, Shaw, and Cohen, and you can follow the thread of Watertown history. The narrative starts with the picture you saw. On the far left stands Ed Cousino. Next to him, Joe Malley, who would go on to be a teacher for years in the Watertown system. And seventh from the left was the left guard, Vahan Dedarian. As the 1918 team is inducted into the Hall of Fame, Frank Cousino and Joe Malley, who are here, all Watertown High School graduates themselves, will receive the tribute on behalf of their fathers and their fathers' generation. An extraordinary record, an extraordinary research project by Nick Avgus, the 1918 football team entering the Hall of Fame to be received by Hall of Fame member Frank Cousino.